Darlene. Nice to see you.
Thank you for having me. It's nice to be here.
Well, I think it's very late where you are in Finland, isn't it?
Yes, 9:30 in the evening, but it's still very light outside and the birds are still chirping. So it's very pleasant in the summer here.
So do you have lots of daylight in the summer in
Yes,
Finland?
we do. It's getting light around sort of 4:30, 5 in the morning. And the birds start around 3 a.m. So quite difficult to sleep late in the summer, but it's beautiful. Long days here. It's very, very pleasant.
And then do your days go really short, like in Iceland?
In the winter, yes.
Yeah.
Very short. Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's interesting.
Yes.
So I've never spoken to somebody on a Spark debate from Finland before. So welcome.
Yes.
But you're not from Finland, are you?
No, I'm not. I've been living here for 19 years, but I am originally from Zimbabwe. And I met my Finnish husband through karate. So I'm a 4th Dan black belt karate instructor. And I met him through karate at a world champs many, many years ago and ended up moving here and marrying him and very happy and enjoying life here. Yeah, it's
excellent.
great.
So we're into karate as well as physical development in the early years.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think what's really interesting about our question is about just actually one word, impactful. I think that's a really strong word. So we're talking about making physical development or impactful activities in the physical development realm of life.
Yes.
So I'll let you start off by what you think that is all about.
Yeah, I mean, because I have been teaching for a very long time, karate to young children and early years movement, I really have witnessed a decline in children's physical ability, which is very worrying. And I think it's only people who work in the area of sport that are really seeing this decline. And we sort of witness how children's physical ability has changed, sadly, sort of, since COVID time. And the children are not moving so much anymore. And this means, their muscles are not as strong as they used to be, crossing the midline. Children are having so many more difficulties with focus and concentration and balance and coordination. And this is all affecting their academic development as well. So, movement has a huge impact, much more than anyone realized. And research is really proving this. And I think a lot of teachers, parents just had no idea how important movement is.
No, I still think that's the case.
Yeah.
I think people don't appreciate how important it is.
Yeah, but I think it's because so long ago, children naturally became coordinated. When we were younger, it wasn't a problem because we were running around. But now that natural sort of coordination is not happening. So therefore, children are having to be taught skills, whereas before they would learn them naturally. But now you actually need to be teaching children how to balance on one leg, how to jump down from a height, whereas normally they would be jumping down out of a tree, how to throw and catch a ball and kick a ball. These are all skills that nowadays they actually need to be taught, an intentional movement, because they are not learning it by themselves out in the playgrounds or playing with parents in parks. It's just not happening anymore.
That's true, isn't it? I mean, I'm a farmer's daughter and I spent most of my childhood at home outside, mainly because I couldn't be trusted to be inside by myself with my sister because we used to get up to mischief. But it's true. I mean, you have space, you run, don't you, as a child? And if you have, you find play that is risky, as we call it, and you do naturally develop a lot of physical skills if you have the opportunity to do so. But that's the same with every area of learning, isn't it?
It is.
We have to give children the opportunities and make the best, well, as educators, to make the best of every opportunity that we can give children. But yes, that's true. And then we also have this I can't think of the word, but we're very much into health and safety these days, where we don't allow children to take risks, or we have been discouraged to take risk they let children take risk.
Yeah, and it is very important for children to be hanging upside down and doing rollovers. I'm finding a lot of the children that I'm teaching here, their necks are very stiff, and that is just from lack of movement and lack of rolling. So, that is not normal. Children should be rolling and tumbling around and rolling down hills, and this is just not happening anymore. And as a result, when I have children who are trying to do a rollover, they're struggling to bend their neck and get their chin down on their chest.
Right.
And the same with, sort of locomotive movement. So when I'm teaching step togethers, moving or galloping, they're struggling to do weight change. And this is because they're not used to doing this kind of movement and being on rough terrain. So their feet are not as well developed as they should be. They're not used to walking up on tiptoes and learning which is the ball of the foot, which is the heel of the foot. So, I sort of really encourage in kindergartens to, as often as possible, incorporate locomotive movement, even if it's just walking from one room to another. Have the children walk on their tiptoes, or have them walk on their heels, or even on the sides of their feet. So, or walking up tall like a giraffe. There's so many ways they can move in a safe way from one place to another in a line. And at the same time, they are learning weight change, they're developing core strength, balance, and their feet are developing.
So, if you mentioned COVID, do you think we had this problem before COVID, or is it just a COVID issue, or has COVID just made it seem particularly bad at the moment?
I think, unfortunately, during that time, kids did spend a lot more time on screens. I mean, for very obvious reasons, we don't really need to go into that. But I definitely, a couple of years after sort of COVID ended, I am seeing a noticeable difference. For example, when I teach karate, I only used to allow children to become yellow belts at age 7. And by that time, they've been able to develop the skills they need for a yellow belt. So to have the balance and the coordination to learn the skills. I have now changed that to 8.5 because I cannot achieve the same skills from the children as I could pre-COVID.
Gosh, that's a big difference.
So that's a real eye-opener for me, and it's changed my whole structure of teaching.
I'm wondering whether this conversation that we're having this evening is actually going to perhaps make people think about what's happening in their settings, consciously think. I mean, one of the things that we do in our software is we put ideas into educators' heads about this is what this child could be learning next. They have lots of choice, but the fact that it's actually written down means that they perhaps see it happening naturally, or they have something that they can actually facilitate that is going to be soaked up by the child because it's at the right time. But, it is possible, because I'm not actually working in a nursery anymore, not at the moment. And, just listening to you, I'm thinking people are hopefully going to go back and just look at the children and just perhaps test out if they can put their chin on their chest and
and I think sorry, Catherine. I think one of the most important things about movement is that their dominant side evolves. It should evolve through movement. A pencil shouldn't just be put into the hand of a child that the teacher thinks.
I know, I agree with that. I totally agree.
Yeah. So, through movement, they actually develop which leg they feel they want to hop on. Or if they're going to step up onto something, they decide which leg goes first. Or if they're going to go and pick up a beanbag, for example, the hand they go and pick it up with is usually their dominant side.
Yes.
So there's many different ways when I'm teaching movement that I'm constantly observing the children and watching their dominant side evolve. And once that dominant side is evident, that, okay, that child keeps on using their left hand, I then encourage the parents, because the parents work with the children in my classes, I then encourage the parents to, always make sure that they use that stronger side so that it develops well. Because if children are unsure by the time they're sort of 5 years old and they're still left, right, it's like a, it's like a bus with two drivers, and the brain and the child is constantly confused about which side to use, and this delays their development. So
I'm wishing now. Sorry, Darlene. I'm wishing now that I'd asked some of our software users how are their children's physical development, because I'm wondering whether, I mean, physical development is often quite easy in some ways to appreciate. Okay, so when you've got milestones, and amongst just stress, it's very holistic, our software. Okay, but when you have physical milestones, can catch a ball, can throw a ball, can walk along a beam. They're black and white, aren't they? Whereas some of the other areas of learning, like personal, social, and emotional development, for example, has a friend, and that's, they might not have a friend, they just might have somebody they attach themselves to because they're familiar every day. But they're not so black and white. I might have to go and do a bit of research after this.
No, well, I mean, look, movement, it impacts children physically, emotionally, socially, and cognitively, all those areas. And I went to a conference once, and one of the speakers, a researcher, her motto was, "Through movement, all else comes." And that is very true, because everything should be learned through whole body movement first, and then they should be learning the cognitive skills.
Yeah,
so often it's not that way around. And then a few years later down the line, the children are not progressing. And once a child is over the age of 8, it's then so much more difficult to break habits. It's more expensive, for the parents now to get them help and extra lessons and to go to occupational therapy and so on. So, but for children to be doing movement and to become coordinated at a young age, before the age of 7, to develop a strong movement foundation by that age, this then prepares them for all later learning. And people just are not aware of how significant this is. And yes, children should learn through play, absolutely. But I'm sort of the opinion that there are so many children with learning difficulties, concentration difficulties nowadays, that movement really needs to be something that is done every day, that the teachers are given inspiration to do, that they have an activity resource, that they have the equipment so that they can implement movement every day. And I mean, for a simple beanbag, for example, there's so much that you can do even in a morning circle. And just having the children sit there and they're just doing flip-flop and they're swinging it around like this, and now they're developing their pincer grip, and now they have to balance on their head and turn around in a circle, put your hands, drop it, pass it under and over your knees, around your body, throw and catch. How many activities have I mentioned that can be done in a morning circle?
Absolutely.
So that's a convenient time and easy to use a beanbag. It can be passed over, crossing the midline from one to the other, for example. So to implement movement in morning circles is so easily done when children move from one classroom to the other, or even if children are at home and they're walking down the hallway to go and clean their teeth, they can walk on their tiptoes. They can walk like a crab. They can hop on one leg. They can jump sideways. So there's so many very simple ways to add in movement.
And also, I would, I'm thinking that the environment that's prepared for the children, we prepared different spaces within our settings for children to learn specific things which cross over as well into different areas of learning. But thinking about how we lay that out. So perhaps children have to crawl through a tunnel to get into something, or they actually have to go down a step to get into the garden as a toddler. Which is something that I actually put into my nurseries. The children had to go down a step. I think it's something that we could be thinking about too, and to generate that more of that natural acquisition of skills, as we were talking about at the beginning.
And I think I mean, of course, it's always good to incorporate pretend play when you're doing movement. Sure. I mean, I'm flipping a pancake. I'm spinning like a helicopter. I mean, you can, and any creative teacher should be able to do that. But I think the important thing is that the children are reaching their milestones, that they can balance on one leg. They can throw and catch a ball different ways. They can do work with a partner, so they learn teamwork.
Yes.
And I'm very often encouraging teachers that during playtime, just every teacher has 1 week, it's this teacher's turn, the next week is that teacher's turn, and they have to do one activity for 10 minutes in the playground. So they can just get a ball and say, okay, who wants to play throw and catch? Stand all those children in the line. Okay, Jack, it's your turn. Ready, catch, throw. Then move to the next one, move to the next one. Do throw and catch with each child 3 or 4 times. Okay, go and play now. They've had that little bit of exposure to movement, the opportunity to learn how to throw and catch well, because, of course, learning to throw and catch is very good with supporting literacy skills.
And also it needs an adult.
Yes.
To throw and catch, you really need an adult to be doing that, throwing the ball accurately so the poor child can catch it, for example. Don't you? Initially.
And I think for movement to be taught by a knowledgeable adult, so I think that a lot of the kindergartens are the teachers, not their fault, but they don't receive that much education in the area of movement because they've never had to have it. But now, with so many children having difficulties and research proving that movement is absolutely crucial in the early years, now the teachers need to get the knowledge of what are the different areas of movement. What is static balance? What is locomotive movement? What is axial stability? What is manipulative skills? I mean, all of these areas together is what develops a strong movement foundation. Yep.
That's really interesting.
Excuse me.
And like everything, we need educators to be confident in the subject, don't we? Otherwise, they won't do it. We were talking about this before we come on.
Yes.
Often in my settings, I had 4 at one time, and it would be maths that was lacking because the people that I employed didn't enjoy maths at school. It's a problem we have in the UK, or certainly did have. And so therefore, they didn't consciously avoid the maths, but the maths was avoided. So the children didn't have that opportunity because it didn't come naturally from the people that were looking after them.
Yeah.
And I can see, we're sort of, we possibly have a generation of educators now who haven't experienced those wild open spaces that maybe you and I played in when we were little.
Yeah.
So in fact, they, perhaps might not be so adventurous. I mean, we talk about forest schools a lot, and that's become very wanting to use the word fashionable. It's not right, the word fashionable, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And it's almost as though we've got to create something because we don't have it if it's not created because it's not there. In our culture.
Yeah.
Do you have forest schools in Finland?
Not forest schools as such, but they certainly do believe in going out into the forests, especially in the summertime. The children spend a lot of time outdoors, and there's a lot of forests and lakes in Finland. So they do go outdoors quite a lot, and they do quite a lot of outdoor learning here.
Yeah.
So it is.
And do they have a lot? I'm asking because I went to On Play Iceland. Look it up, folks, if it appeals to you, because it was a fantastic experience. And I went, I think it was for 2 weeks or 10 days. And it was it's an early years educational event.
Mm-hmm.
And the children had such freedom when they were out. I mean, they had lots of outdoor play. They went outside all weathers. They had all the gear, but which I expected. But they also had so much freedom when they were outside. There was nobody saying, come back, or go there. You know, that they were able to explore and discover things far beyond perhaps what we as educators would allow children to do here. And I'm going to get slapped for that probably, because somebody's going to pipe up. But that doesn't happen in their setting. And I'm being very generalized here, but you know, that really struck me. And we have to have confidence in the children, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. And and I think, you know, as far as movement goes, the children in the winter, it's a little bit more restricted because of all the heavy clothing they wear, but they still tend to have a great time playing in the snow. And the playgrounds often don't have a lot in them, and they do explore sort of playing in the sand pits and everything. And as I said, they go into the forest, and the sort of finish early years curriculum. They also have quite strict movement goals that the children have to achieve. And some of the things stipulated in the curriculum, for example, is that they have to use different equipment. They have to use different group types. So individual movement, partner movement, group movement. They have to do movement of different intensity levels. So that's also brought up quite often. And a lot of research is being done on movement here. And, you know, they realize that in the early years, they do have a problem with movement. And a lot of the children are not having the coordination balance that they should for their age. And the education department here is actually putting a lot of money into early years physical education next year.
That's interesting.
So it's going to be quite a strong focus there.
That's interesting. Because here in the UK, our emphasis is always on communication and language development, as we understand that it's the indicator for how well a child does in the future. And again, via COVID, where parents were working from home and children were having to entertain themselves for a lot of the time, you know, that has suffered a great deal. But our emphasis here, I would say, is on communication and language, not physical development per se, across the board. Although, as you were saying earlier, you feel on LinkedIn, for example, there's quite a lot of people that are talking about physical development, which is really interesting because I don't see that. I see your posts when you post, but I don't see it as a...
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you know, because that's my area, that's my passion, you follow people who are...
Yeah, that's right. No, that's what I'm...
No, yeah, so no, there's definitely a big emphasis on movement. And I find, you know, I do have my platform, MovKids, where I am providing activities and lesson plans and support for educators. But, you know, I've realized that, you know, having them subscribe to my platform and take one workshop, it's not enough, because as we were saying earlier, the educators need to be competent and confident with teaching movement, as they do with everything else. So I'm sort of moving more into an area where I'm doing longer cooperation with kindergartens. And every month I'm doing workshops or webinars with them, providing support every day. You know, today, let's try this activity. And this is our focus this week. We're talking about ball skills. Next week, we're talking about basic tumbling skills. Next week, we're going to be doing aiming and throwing. So I've actually created a structured framework where I'm working with kindergartens long term. And by doing that, then the kindergarten teachers, they're slowly learning with my support and mentoring how to teach movement well.
Excellent.
Because the quality of teaching is just so important for their future development and well-being. And movement really does pay a lot of attention to every other area that the children, you know, that they need to develop. It's holistic, totally. Movement is very, very important with supporting all other development.
Yeah. I mean, I'm agreeing with you totally. I mean, we're in early years, we do focus on children's gross motor skills before we look at their fine motor skills. And, you know, we want children to do things correctly when it comes to writing, because they have the skills they need to write things properly rather than to have to unlearn them later. I keep every debate I seem to bring up this. It's making the most of that brain development before the child goes to school. I'm quite passionate about it. Wasting time in children having to relearn things. And also, I think, we're talking about educators being educated in how to teach physical development or physical skills. But actually, parents need to understand this as well, that actually going to the park. As a child, my parents worked on a farm, so they were pretty much working 24/7.
Yeah.
And on Sundays, my maternal grandparents used to have us as kids. I have a younger sister. And we used to go to the park, weather permitting, every Sunday after lunch. Sometimes we'd take a picnic tea. And we used to go to the swings. And they used to basically sit there and leave us just play, really, not neglectfully.
Sure.
But it was a weekly event, and I don't think that happens in most families now.
No.
I don't think they go to the park or maybe the beach or what have you on a weekly basis. I'd be surprised. They're more likely to pay for a child to go to ballet lessons or possibly karate. I'm not sure. Having two girls, they're more likely to pay for the children to go to something like rugby or football or dancing than they are to actually take them to a big space and let them run.
And I mean, I teach classes here on a Sunday, and just this last Sunday, I had a parent say to me that the teachers commented on how well their child copes with physical activities, and those, this person's child only comes to me once a week for 1 hour, but that is 1 hour of structured, playful teaching. I do musical instruments and use music, and we use the parachute. I use scarves. I have equipment and set up.
Yeah, I put on the video, outgoing video. Yeah. Look at your website. It's packed full of stuff for your website.
Yeah. So, the fact is that they have one good quality teaching hour a week. It makes a significant difference to their physical development. So much so that teachers are even commenting on how much they're better than the other children, just because of 1 hour a week. But it's because it's been taught by me, who's been teaching a long time. But I make movement fun. I use my voice. I know how to run my classes well, that my classes flow. And this is something that is so important for teachers, that, I teach them how to run a movement class well, so that every activity it's taught well and the kids benefit hugely. Yeah, they have the repetition. The teachers know what to look for, like how to do ball skills. I put the kids in 2 lines. This is the first way we do it. This is the instructions that you have to give. This is what you have to look out for. I don't let the children throw the ball until I tell them to, because that enables me to observe and see who's struggling with throwing a ball. So well-structured classes, by a teacher who has learned, like from me or from any other physical ed person who's able to teach them, it makes such a difference to the children's development. And, the sooner everybody realizes that movement should be a daily occurrence, even if it's a little bit here and there throughout the day, or maybe it's one good movement class a week, it doesn't matter, and it's very good for teachers and parents to be witnessing their own children's milestones and what they can and can't do.
Yeah, I agree.
Very
with that. And your class that you do, what do you call it?
I have different names. So I have, for my 2 and 3-year-old classes where they come with a parent, I call that Kangaroo Kids. And then for my next 2 levels up is Monkey Gym. And then for my sort of final 5 to 7-year-old age groups, that's called Move, my Move classes. Right. So I give the children diplomas, and they reach certain milestones as we go along.
Yeah. So what was the parent of this child that you've been talking about that has an hour a week? What's their motivation in sending their child? I'm just curious.
Well, I don't know. I mean, they hear about my classes, they come and give them a try. And I think they see that, thank goodness. They think I know what I'm doing. No, but I mean, I really make the classes fun and I connect. And I think that's one of the most important things.
See, we don't have anything like that here. That's why I'm asking. You know,
They
parents are more like, parents, as I said earlier, are more likely to choose football or dance rather than, or maybe a gym class, a tumble tops class.
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty much what I do because I have a gymnastic background. So my focus is very much on sort of that foundation.
I'm not sure there's many of those around anymore, though. I'm just thinking that maybe they're not.
My main equipment, even in my program, is ropes, balls, hoops, beanbags. So, simple, affordable equipment that's quite durable. And so much can be done with that simple equipment. And for teachers, they might think of 10 things they can do with a beanbag, and then that's it, So teachers need inspiration. So I do believe a platform like I have is very good for inspiring teachers and having structured lesson plans. I'm a very experienced movement teacher, so I know what works for different ages. Yeah. So I've sort of structured my lesson plans, beginner, intermediate, advanced, so that the teachers can follow them and know that it is suitable for their children. So, I think it's important that teachers they're given the knowledge, they're given the opportunity, the time in their daycare day to implement movement, and they are given money to have the resources, very important. And for the teachers to be able to be free in learning how to teach movement, for them to pay for workshops or professional development or whatever, to really help teachers develop in this area. I think it is crucial for kindergartens right now. If we're going to reduce the amount of children with obesity and focus and concentration difficulties and everything else. I mean, just in my, I never really knew what a selective mute was, for example. Pre-COVID time, I had never had a child who was a selective mute. I have 3 now.
It's interesting. I've actually worked with a child that had selective mute.
So, I just find that there is a lot more, there's a wide variety of children nowadays. And I think I find my biggest challenge, and with my karate instructors as well, we talk about this a lot, sort of pre-COVID time, you would take in a group of 10 children of the same age, and they would all be sort of pretty much of a muchness, able to concentrate, able to develop and progress at the same pace. But nowadays, if you take in 10 children of the same age, their ability is so diverse. So diverse.
I think in early years, if you had a group of 2-year-olds, I think they would be quite diverse.
Yeah. Okay. I'm talking sort of 5 to 7-year-olds here.
Okay. Yeah.
And then that makes teaching very difficult. It doesn't matter what you teach, whether it's movement or you're in a kindergarten teaching writing. It doesn't matter what it is. If you've got a range of diverse abilities, it does make teaching much more challenging. And the teacher, if they don't have a lot of experience, it is very difficult for them to cope with a group of children with diverse abilities. So, as a result, I think, here in Finland, there is a big shortage of kindergarten teachers. I'm not sure what it's like in the UK, but
yes, we have a continual recruitment crisis, which seems to get worse and worse, and morale is not great either in a lot of them,
because there's so many diverse children, and the teachers not getting the assistance. The class size is still the same. So many children's need a one-on-one assistant. So, teaching becomes very, very challenging.
Yeah. And of course, there's also a lack of money for resources as well. Yeah. But, with your resources, they are not expensive, hoops and beanbags and
if every kindergarten, I apologize, I'm very passionate about this, but if every kindergarten actually implemented movement every day, if they even had one member of staff, maybe they're a bit sporty, they only had that person trained to teach movement, that person taught every group 2 or 3 times a week, there would be a huge difference in the children's ability to focus and concentrate, communicate, their moods. Movement affects sleeping habits. It affects mood, so children learn
Let's
to
talk,
communicate.
let's talk well-being, because physical development is very much, I mean, go for a walk, get fresh air. It improves how we feel about life. I certainly have places I go that
Yeah.
make me go,
Yeah. I think one of the most important things about physical development is that children learn emotional regulation. And I think this is one of the huge problems with children today is they don't know, their self-regulation is so poor, and they don't know how to behave in different situations. And movement definitely provides many opportunities where the teachers can help children learn how to behave. Like, don't push, let them have their turn. You can't jump the queue. Now you need to be patient and don't laugh. It's not nice to laugh at that child because they're struggling. There's so many opportunities where children learn self-regulation through movement. And movement, muscle tone, so important. Movement improves muscle tone and bone density. And so many children are struggling with core strength through lack of movement. So W sitting, for example, the children are not using
I
their
saw
core.
something about that. I saw you posted something about that today, didn't you?
Yes, I recently shared a post. So, children don't use their core strength. So, when I'm doing anything, whether if they're, for example, manipulating a beanbag, the children are not allowed to just be slouching or sitting cross-legged. I have them kneel. So they're sitting on their feet and they're having to use their core strength. And then they have the freedom of use of their upper body to do whatever it is we are doing with a beanbag or a small ball. So, but that encourages core strength development. So
tell us about W sitting, please, Darlene.
Yeah, I mean, it's only recently that I really understood how bad it is for the children. And the main reason is because they don't use their core when they W sit. And of course, it's very bad for their ankles because they're now at an angle that is not really natural. And a lot of children who W sit, they sometimes tend to walk poorly. So the muscles in the feet need to be put in the place where they're going to develop well. And I find that, when children sit on their feet, for example, they're having to point their toes, right?
Yes.
And so many children today, they struggle to point their toes. They don't have the flexibility in their feet. And that's because they don't sit on their feet enough. They are W sitting or just sitting cross-legged on the floor. So the actual flexibility of their feet is poor. They cannot point their toes. And, it's something so simple, but if the children actually knelt with their feet under them, they are then strengthening and the muscles in their feet are becoming more flexible because they're used to being in that position. So, I find the feet are very underdeveloped. I do not allow the children in my classes to wear socks, for example, because for sensory reasons, for safety reasons, and for the children to use the muscles in the feet.
I mean, parents often will put their children into shoes before the child can even walk, don't they? I mean, it's one of those stages of development that parents want their children to wear shoes as early as possible. It's like growing up. I mean, a lot of my family live in Australia, and people walk around town in bare feet.
Yeah.
Something you said though there, cross-legged. Is there anything wrong with the children sitting cross-legged?
No, not if they're sitting up straight, not at all. But I think children, when they are given a screen, they're looking down. So their shoulders, they're slouching, So if they're sitting cross-legged and they're up straight, that's great. But I think, once again, lack of movement, their upper body, their shoulder strength is not what it should be, because they're not like doing wheelbarrows. When I'm saying wheelbarrows, when you hold their feet and they have to walk, or they're not being held upside down or walking their feet up a wall backwards so that they're having to support their upper body weight. So, the children's shoulders and arms are not as strong as they should be. And, this causes a problem too with their posture. I mean, I had a kindergarten contact me to say, we're noticing a kindergarten, this is shocking, that so many children are slouching and they're not sitting up straight. And for children that age, should this be a problem? No.
Mm.
So I was like giving a whole lot of different movement exercises for them that, you know, will help develop the upper body and the different ways they can support the children's posture, certain times how they can make sure that they are sitting up straight, and doing exercises like walking up on tiptoe and reaching up high, and, you know, doing exercises that do promote a straight spine.
That's interesting. Being an old age pensioner, my kitchen, I have a very peculiar kitchen that I've inherited as I've bought this house, which needs to be sorted out. It's totally impractical. But I was actually thinking the other day, this is really good for me because I'm having to bend down to get that, reach up to get that. Yeah. And actually, I'm thinking I have more problems with my legs than I do my upper body for that reason. But let's go back to what you were saying. I know what it was I was thinking about, chairs. Now, in some of our nurseries here, not a great deal, but in some nurseries here, they don't have chairs.
Yeah.
They only use chairs for sitting to eat food, meal times.
Yeah.
A bit like a standing desk, really.
Yeah.
Sort of scenario.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that? Do you think that's a good idea?
Yeah, I think it's good. I think, you know, of course, there's different kinds of chairs and backs, you know, so I think that there has to be some thought put into children's furniture in a kindergarten.
I agree.
You know? And children, they like to be on the floor. I think they prefer to be on the floor doing stuff, you know, but as I said, having them sitting in a position that is beneficial for them is really good. And they need movement breaks. You know, they can't be sitting on the floor for long periods of time or focusing for long periods of time.
Yeah. I mean, they still have the tables so the children can
they work at them.
Still do activities on a table, but they stand up and do it. They don't have to sit at a chair to do it.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. I think it's great.
Yeah.
I always recommend that.
We had a physiotherapist parent. I think he was a parent. No, I don't think he was a parent. I think it was. I was trying to get businesses involved with what I was doing, and we had a physiotherapist, and he came in to talk to the staff about how to sit on a little chair.
Oh,
and that was it was basically kneeling with your legs slightly apart, your feet. So it'd be like that. If the ends of my fingers are my feet, so you'd be like that with the facing me. Does that make sense? And then you just perch your bottom on the chair. So in fact, you were kneeling, but had your bottom perched on the chair. And I must say, since doing that, since having that chat with him, everybody took up the role. I mean, it was a bit. I have incredibly long legs, and in some ways, you know, I had to be careful it wasn't a tripping hazard for the child, you know, that was walking behind the chair. But for me, it made it so much easier, much more comfortable. Once I got used to it, much more comfortable sitting like that than it would be sitting with my knees up by my chin almost, you know. But chairs, I mean, I think early years chairs that are bought for early years provision these days are generally have been made specially to suit children's backs, etc. Or they say they are. We don't. We just take everybody's word for it, don't we? That's good. So let's go back to well-being. So do you find, see, I haven't consciously looked at this, but do you find children who are not developing as perhaps they should be as happy as perhaps a child that is?
Well, I think a child who is physically self-confident is going to go much further than a child who is not. So, you know, for example, if children are exposed to movement in a daycare or a kindergarten, and they've learned how to hop and jump and spin and throw and catch balls and balance and do teamwork activities. If they've done all of that in a kindergarten and now suddenly they're going to start basketball or cricket or dancing or karate, they've already got that strong movement foundation. So they're confident and they're eager and they will go and try any physical challenge because they're physically self-confident. Those children who have not been given the opportunity to move, they then are going to be less inclined to do that. This now affects their social and communication skills. They don't make new friends. They don't go and participate in
not part of the pack.
A lot of kids playing football in the park, so I think, lack of a strong movement foundation affects a child in so many areas, not just the fact that it supports literacy skills and maths and science and all of that, which it does, just with physical self-confidence. Children are not going to be wanting to go and try anything that's strange if they know they've never even really done any ball skills. So I think knowing how to kick a ball, throw and catch a ball, how to run fast, how to balance with a partner, all of these things, they help a child have physical confidence, and they're then going to be more inclined to develop, and do different hobbies and be more confident to go and play with other children. And I think that's a huge bonus. So, I think that's a very, very important thing, because having that strong foundation supports so many other areas. And it's up to us, the adults, as you said earlier, it's the adults who have to inspire them to learn.
Yeah. But the adults right now possibly just need to appreciate there's a problem. Yes, I think we need to start.
I think management, kindergarten management, is where it all starts. And if management doesn't realize that, these children need to be doing movement, I'm going to be giving money towards equipment. I'm going to get somebody to come and do workshops on movement. I'm going to make time in our daily timetable for movement. If they are not on board with supporting the educators with this, it's very difficult to improve the physical coordination and balance of the children in your daycare.
Yeah.
So ultimately, that's where it starts, with the manager, and then having, providing the knowledge that the teachers need and the continuous support and mentorship, like I said, that I am going to be providing, is very, very important if it's going to become a sustainable subject, because movement should be a subject in a kindergarten. It should be a compulsory subject every day, and it's not in many places. But to me, it's the only way to make an improvement in.
I mean, in schools here, it's physical education that is removed. The amount of physical education is removed from the timetable, along with music. Music is another thing that
it seems like people should be looking more at the research that's being done. That is definitely, I mean, I read Sally Goddard-Blight's books, and they are very, very informative about the importance of movement. And I think that if people had just had more knowledge about the importance of movement and why it is so important, I think they would be a lot more concerned and make sure that it is happening in kindergartens.
Also, I'm thinking of, the future in 50 years' time. I mean, we don't know what that's going to bring, but I would imagine that as a race, we are going to be more sedentary.
Very, very weak. I think that people will become very weak. I mean, the youngsters, even going to the army here in Finland, they're finding that their fitness levels are not what they should be.
Right.
So if your young adults are not fit, that's a very bad start. If children are starting school without a movement foundation, this means when they're in middle school or junior school, those poor PE teachers have to teach that movement foundation then, instead of the children arriving to them with that.
Yeah.
And then so it goes on. If they're in junior school that they haven't developed it, then in high school, what happens?
Yeah.
So
it's like learning a language, isn't it? The earlier you learn a language, the easier it is. And less scary as well.
Yeah. So the less people move, the weaker they become, the unhealthier they become, the more obese they become. So, and then it's just not passed on to their children. And it ends up costing society a lot of money.
Yeah, I get that.
These people.
So in Finland, do you have an obesity problem? Because we do here.
It has increased in children. It has increased, definitely. People are they're pretty health conscious here. I mean, we have great fresh air here. We have beautiful forests and lakes. A lot of people are active, but it is on the decline. And there was recently a research that many children between the ages of 8 and 12 are stopping hobbies. So that is not a good sign. So, there is less movement happening throughout. It doesn't matter what age the human is. People are moving less, and it has detrimental side effects.
I'm really going to have to talk about this when I talk to my nurseries and preschools. I talk to nurseries and preschools all week. We have regular appointments, and they can, if they want one after the regular appointments, they can have it. I'm going to have to ask a few questions, I think. So that's really helpful, Darlene.
Yeah, I mean, for example, excuse me for butting in here, but if teachers, they should all know, are their children left or right dominant? Can they balance on one leg? Can they all throw and catch a ball? Can they all throw a beanbag?
No, we have all that in our software, but I'm more concerned about whether I suppose I'm sort of saying, I'm wondering whether the software is actually supporting the practitioners and physical development isn't as behind as perhaps I'm worrying about. That's what does that make sense? But I need to ask some questions just to reassure me and perhaps point out to them if it is. I mean, it is a prime area of learning in the EYFS, and within our software, it is very much there as a prime area. And I'm curious now, very curious on the situation. And I don't have any grandchildren. I don't see a child unless I go to the shop at the moment. I'm not, and that's going to change, but at the minute I'm not seeing children, so I can't make that judgment really.
I think
and in fact, my friends' children and people that work for me, their children are quite stimulated in that way, I would say, naturally stimulated in that way, not consciously necessarily. But yeah, so.
Yeah, no, it would be good to know if kindergartens have equipment like balls, beanbags, hoops.
Yeah, I think they do. I think they do.
And, having an outdoor set is great too, because if they're doing skills in a classroom, and then they can go outdoors and practice them at playtime. So
yeah, I would say apart from the beanbags, sorry, Darlene, I would say apart from the beanbags, they're more likely to have the equipment outside than they are to have it indoors. I would say, but that, not always, obviously.
Yeah.
Certainly in my settings, our hoops and our skipping ropes and the bats and the balancing beams, etc., were all outside. They weren't out all the time. They were in a store shed, but they were kept outside. Beanbags often were left outside and had to be thrown away.
Yeah, that doesn't work.
But it's really interesting.
Yeah.
Right, has anybody on the chat got anything? This is what often happens, you see. We talk away and people listen, and we don't get very much from the chat. If anybody's got anything on the chat they'd like to say, then please do so. This has been fascinating, actually. I'm really pleased we took this opportunity. Thank you very much. Is there anything else you wanted to say, though?
No, I think just
10:30 at night for you. I'm conscious.
Yeah, no problem. But yeah, I think I would just encourage any adult to keep your child or the children in your care moving. If they need inspiration, they're welcome to come to MovKids.com. There's actually a free resource there they can take. It's a hotspot layout.
There's
With
lots of
Jen.
free resources, just lots of videos of ideas on your website.
Yeah,
Super.
so, you know,
Anyway,
I'm happy for anybody to contact me. I would love to help however I can.
lovely. That's super. Thank you very much.